I'm just reading about the new labor secretary who whose base salary is $1 million a year as of 2012. Over $1 million. Annual base salaries should be competitive and create a measure of financial security for our executive officers, is the quote in the 2012 SEC filing for the new labor secretary, whose employees are picketing and fighting to get $15 an hour. Let me repeat that again. His base salary in 2012, that was 4 years ago, was over $1 million. I don't know if we know what the exact figure is. And the filing says annual base salaries should be competitive and create a measure of financial security for our executive officers at over $1 million a year, a measure of financial security. Not even, we got to give a lot more money. Not even a polite way of saying we got to give a lot more money than probably we should because we want to get the best talent. No, the issue is financial security. For someone making a base salary of over $1 million in 2012, 3.5 years out from the financial crisis, versus those people who are fighting for $15 an hour. Who knows? Maybe though he, aside from the generals, he very well may bring down the average net worth in that cabinet by just making millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. He should create like a sideline where he I don't know, creates some type of university where he tells his employees how to make a killing off of real estate.
Or making
burgers.
Or make it easier to steal wages and then go back into the fast food industry when he's done.
Yeah, like completely maybe eliminate the need for human labor entirely.
At one
which
point,
is another
we're
thing
going to ask,
he's talked
how
about.
long is this band going to hold together? How many, how long are the billionaires going to hang out? I wonder if they have a benchmark. I just want to make sure that we've been able to reverse these 10 laws.
Yes.
These 10 regulations.
Well, that's actually an interesting question, in some ways with this cabinet and what's happening in general is are we actually seeing the next split? In a larger sense, the billionaires and millionaires uniting on some type of plutocratic agenda, but now it's hey, we're billionaires. We're literally, what is it, a couple hundred people? Maybe even less. We can set policy and I don't know. If maybe the millionaires and the professional classes don't like it, then tough. I mean, if we're moving into the more less bureaucratic version of it, right?
When back before Hayes was doing his TV show, he did a great piece on Davos, where he was talking about fractal inequality,
the class resentments inside Davos.
Yes, and apparently, I don't know if it's in one big building or what. I had probably multiple buildings, but there are floors that are literally you can't get the key card for unless you're a billionaire. And the 100 millionaires are just down there fuming.
Well, right. And then right. And that's maybe there's some potentiality there of the when the millionaires start rioting at Davos. This is unacceptable. I need to be in the front row to see Bono personally. It's disgusting.
I don't want to say too much about this because this was more of a social thing, but I recently spoke to someone who worked for a billionaire fairly closely, on a daily basis was dealing with the guy. And he said to me, and he's not a particularly liberal guy. He's not a conservative, but sort of like a tax cut Republican. Didn't vote for Trump. And he said, it was grotesque. He said the institutional norms, the societal norms that restrict us, it does not restrict that person. There's no customs. By customs, I mean like literally going in and out of like the country. That doesn't exist for them.
Not at all.
There's no barriers to what they want. They call an institution a major institution. If they ever run into, which happens rarely but does happen, where someone says like, I know you've given a lot of money, but we can't do that. That person is then just sort of vaporized.
Right.
And, you know, I was on Hayes' program last night, and we were talking about the billionaires and the generals that make up and you contemplate this, right? Generals, they're lifelong military people. They've obviously had to deal with war, et cetera, but they have not lived an average civilian life. Right? They don't have the same sort of concerns that average people do in terms of like housing. And I mean, I'm not saying,
They live under a socialized system, ironically.
Well, I mean,
right?
exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, they don't have to worry about Medicare being cut or whatnot, which is not to say that they don't have economic issues. And certainly, I think those are more pronounced if you're going to leave the military in many respects. And then billionaires who literally float above all of this.
Right.
Right? None of this is, and these are people who have not lived civilian lives, for better or for worse in terms of the military. But I mean, but they're running the country now based on sets of premises. And the military people are obviously doing more foreign affairs, although Department of Homeland Security. But all of these billionaires, completely no sense of the lived human experience of 99% of...
And so much of their fellow citizens. And so much of the conversation was always just about...
But that's my point. They're not their fellow citizens.
They're not, right. They're literally not, of course. And then everything, I think, though, even those of us like on the left got kind of dragged into like... the good billionaires versus the bad billionaires. And like, obviously, George Soros is someone who does, all kidding aside, he does use his money in significantly better ways, and he does seem to have a much more highly developed social conscience. But the overall conversation of like, it's just not tenable to have a functioning democracy with that level of wealth concentration. I mean, you remember when we had Gar Alpovitz on? Do you remember that guy? And do you remember how he said we lived in an era of medieval income inequality? And he was saying this at a speech in a university, and some, medieval historian raises his hand with I have a quibble, and he's kind of like, oh no, he's going to call me out on like the specifics of whatever. And the guy did call him out, but he said, actually, the medieval period sort of like pales in comparison to what we're living under right now.
There was not that level of inequality
Not
at
at
that
all.
time.
Right.
Which, when you think about it, makes sense, right? Because the technologically, in terms of travel and in terms of just sort of the capacity to own is much greater now on the high end. Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Subscribe.